Mountaineers were, and one of the today's mountaineers were the first to climb this mountain. There would be so much ego and, things would have been blown out of proportion. And these two gentlemen, they climbed this mountain. They were passionate about it, made it to the summit, came back as heroes and inspired millions of people, saying that nothing is impossible, everything is possible. And these two gentlemen proved that 73 years ago. But it did not get to their heads. Both of them came back down as heroes, but they continued to live simple, humble lives. And in fact, both of them spent the rest of their lives giving back to the community and to the people that lived in the shoulders of the Himalayas. My father started So he was born in Tibet, and in the 1914, around that time. And his parents moved to Nepal, for a better life. And he grew up in Nepal, in the shadows of Mount Everest, grazing the yaks, the animals that they had. And wondering always, what is that mountain that is so high that no birds can fly over? And he was looking at the mountain all the time. And I believe he was destined to climb this mountain. A few years ago, I just learned what was not known outside the Buddhist monasteries. And that is that in the beginning of the last century, a high Himalayan priest had made a prophecy that a Himalayan Buddhist would be the first to climb Chomolungma, or first to climb Mount Everest. And he was destined to do this. He wanted desperately to, climb this mountain. He tried, the first time he tried was when he was 18 years old. He ran away from his home in Nepal and went to Darjeeling, because that's where all the expeditions started. To climb Everest, because Nepal was closed to the outside world until 1950. And he ran away from home, and when he was 18 years old, he got his first job to go as a Sherpa on this mountain. And he reached the height of 24,000 feet at the time. And he proved himself, stronger than any other person that was on the mountain. He carried double the loads. He walked twice as fast, dropped supplies, came back and picked up another load, went up. And ever since then, people started noticing, the Western climbers started noticing, this man had he was super. And so he never gave up. He went on 6 different expeditions to Mount Everest. From the Tibetan side 4 times, and 2 times from the Nepalese side when they opened in 1950. And on his 7th attempt, he finally made it. And just 1 year before, in 1952, he was with the Swiss expedition. And he and his Swiss climbing partner, Raymond Lambert, they were almost about 400 feet from the summit. They could literally see the summit. But they had some issues with the oxygen, and weather was not looking good. So both of them decided to turn around and come back. But if they wanted, they could have reached the summit with no problem at all. But they probably would not have made it back down alive. Knowing when to turn around is very important. Not only on the mountain, but also in your daily life or in whatever businesses you are. Because you can always come back, regroup, bring it stronger, and go back. And that's exactly what my father did. And the next year, he was invited by the British expedition to join their team as a member. And he was on the list with Hillary to go for the summit push. And on the 29th of May, 1953, he finally made it on the top with Edmund Hillary.
Thank you for sharing that. It's very inspiring. You ended the last comment about him joining the British mountaineering team and partnering with Edmund Hillary to climb. Clearly, they don't speak the same language. How was the partnership like? Climbing this together?
Well, yeah, that's my father hardly spoke any English. During that time. And Hillary did not speak Nepali or Sherpa or Hindi or, to communicate. And how were these two people communicating? So you can imagine 2 people at 27,500 feet, the last camp, they set up one last camp, and just 2 people sleeping in a small tent, on a small ledge. And both of them are almost 6 feet. Ed Hillary is almost 6 feet 3 inches or something, and my father is about 6 feet. 2 long, tall guys on a small ledge, not talking to each other at night, as if like a husband and wife get in a fight. And the next morning, they were going to go out and create history. And it just goes to show you that no matter what ethnic background you're from, geographic locations you come from, as long as you have the same passion and the drive and you work together as a team, anything is possible. And that was proven by these two gentlemen almost 70 plus years ago.
Wow, even though it's different languages, as long as you have the passion, same goals aligned, you can go forward. Kind of reminds me of our Chinese team and our American team. American team don't speak Chinese, our Chinese team don't speak English, but somehow we can make lots work. So, sorry, just such a side thing. But of course, talking back about your dad, with this whole passion about mountaineering, you said that he failed 6 times or 7 times before he made the final summit. How were those failures like? When he went back home, did he tell you about it? How did he kept going?
Well, I wasn't born, when he climbed the mountain. I was born much later. But through the stories I've heard through him, he never gave up. He just stayed focused all the time. And he was very determined to make sure that he got on all the expeditions. And every expedition member that came to Darjeeling or looking for Sherpas to climb, they were all given a book. It's like your resume. So after every expedition, the expedition leader would sign and write on something about how you perform. So that book carried all the weight. And by the second time he was on the mountain with an expedition, word got around that to anybody who was coming to look for Sherpas, to make sure you hire this man, because he was a superhuman man. They even believed that he had bigger lungs than anyone else, because he performed extraordinarily on the mountains. So 6 different attempts on the mountain, and the highest point he got was almost about 27,000 feet on the 1936 expedition with Shipton. And that was the highest any human had ever gone up and came back down alive.
Thank you for sharing that. So your father definitely became a global symbol. Everyone knew him as the first man up Mount Everest. How did that impact your growing up years? Do you want to be a mountaineer like him?
Yeah, I realized who my father was only when I was around 6, 7 years old, because growing up, and he was a very simple man, he'd walk around everywhere, just like a normal human being. And I found out more about him as when I went to school, when other children looked at me and talked about, the teachers talked about my father, and then basically in all the literature that we have in school, growing up in India and Nepal, there's a whole section, you have to learn about the conquest of Everest, climbing the highest mountain. So people knew about him through that. But he was a, like I said, very simple, humble, man. And like I said earlier also, I asked him, to pull some strings so I can join an expedition to climb Everest. And he flatly said no. He said he climbed so that we wouldn't have to. He wanted to give us the best education so we can continue our lives in other careers rather than climbing. And because climbing was dangerous. And if you ask the Sherpas today, all the Sherpas that are climbing and risking their lives on the mountain, you ask them why they climb, they will give you the exact same idea. They answer saying that they climb for the children. And even though he sent us to universities in the US and everywhere, after I came back, I decided to follow my passion and my dream to climb this mountain. And I was finally able to do that later on.
Thank you. And we should talk a little bit more about yourself. After you started climbing mountains, and you actually created something special yourself as well, making the impossible possible. The IMAX video that we saw earlier just now. Tell us more about it.
When I was around 8 years old, I followed my father on one of his many journeys. And I don't know about your families, but most of the families when they have vacations, they go to the beach or they go to the shopping mall or go somewhere, have a nice meal. Or during our family, when we had vacation time, we put on our backpacks and my father would take us out for camping for 4 or 5 days into the wilderness. And when I was around 8 years old, I followed my father on one of his journeys. And before I knew it, I was standing on top of a small mountain about 18,000 feet. 18,000 feet is very small in the Himalayas. I don't know how big the mountains or hills are in Singapore or where you guys come from. But during that time I realized that I love being in the mountains. I love the outdoors, and I ultimately wanted to aspire to climb Everest because I looked up to my father as my greatest role model. He was my hero and I wanted to become just like him. And I never left focus. You know, even though I was in the US, I was still climbing, doing a lot of rock climbing, ice climbing, no altitude climbing. And I finally got the opportunity when I received a call from David Bashir's a world-renowned mountaineer and a filmmaker. And he said that he wanted me to join the IMAX Everest expedition, where they want to take the large format IMAX camera to the summit of Mount Everest. And this is a task that was thought to be impossible by the producers of Hollywood, you know, all the producers and directors, and also the climbing fraternity said it's impossible because a normal IMAX camera weighs almost about 200 kilos. You know, it's a big, it goes on wheels. And the IMAX Corporation said, we're going to design a lightweight camera for you, and it's only going to be 22 kilos. 22 kilo is very heavy, you know, still very heavy. And the batteries had to be redesigned. The film itself, you know, a roll of film weighed 6 kilos, just one roll of film. And when you open the film out and pulled it out, it was about 1,000 feet long. And when you shut the roll of film, it lasted 90 seconds. So we had tons of film that had to go up on this mountain. And even though it was an impossible task, David Bashir's job was to select the cream, you know, the dream team to make this possible. And he wanted to make the impossible possible. And selecting the team was, you know, very key because he needed expert climbers, you know, in all the different fields. We had a great team of Araceli Segarra from Spain, from Japan. We had Sumiya Suzuki and Ed Wiesters, a veteran mountaineer. He had climbed Everest 3 times earlier. From the US, Robert Schauer was the, you know, he was the assistant cameraman, David Bashir, and I was selected as the climbing leader of this team. And my job was to make sure that we find the safest route, shortest route, and a route where we don't have, you know, 60 people, you know, in the background climbing, because we don't want, you know, so many people in the same frame when we're climbing. So we had a very difficult task. And at the same time, I'm not sure if you heard, but it was in 1996. It's the worst disaster in the mountain's history, where 14 climbers died and 9 climbers lost their lives in one single night, including some great mountain guides, you know, Rob Hall from New Zealand and Scott Fisher, you know, Japanese climbers. A lot of people died. So on top of being, you know, having to film, we had to stop filming, and then we had to go up to high up to the death zone to get back, you know, retrieve the surviving climbers that were still stranded up there. So we were pushed into a task of rescuing almost 24 climbers, brought everybody back. We regrouped, and then we went up and climbed this mountain again without any issues. And every time, it's not like you take a video camera and you shoot whatever you want. We actually had to do takes. You know, we had slates, it's action, and then we start walking. You know, we had all this thing going on at these ridges, at the most, and we wanted to select the most dangerous places because it looked cool for you. When you look at the movie, you say, wow. You know, so we had to look for locations like that. And every time we go up, we shoot a roll of film for the day, and the film would go down to base camp through a Sherpa, and that Sherpa would take the film from base camp to Kathmandu, you know, by a flight. And from Kathmandu, we'll go on a flight to Los Angeles. And 2 days later, we'll be talking on the phone, you know, satellite phone with the producers in Los Angeles, and they would say, all right, I like the shot, but I could not see Jamling's face. It was a little bit on the shade, so you need to take that again. You know, so a lot of these things we had to do, you know, back and forth a lot. But I'm glad we did, because the film, it's called Everest on IMAX theaters, and it did really well, and you know, it was a piece of art work that we did.
Amazing, thank you for sharing that background behind the film. How do you feel actually when you actually completed the entire film, standing on top of the summit? Do you feel your father? How did it feel for you? You know?
I felt very emotional. I felt great, you know, because when you get to the top, you know, like Ed Wiesters, my climbing partner, he mentions that, you know, climbing a mountain is optional. Getting down is mandatory. Somehow people forget that, and a lot of people don't make it down, you know, because they give 100% of whatever they have just to get up, and they leave nothing to come down. And you also need to save a little energy to come down. You know, you still have to come all the way back down. So people forget that. And just getting to the summit was a great experience. Something I dreamt of doing almost, all my life. And 43 years later, I was standing on the same spot my father once stood. And it was more of a pilgrimage for me, more of a, paying homage to my late father, because I never got to know him as much as I wanted, because he was always traveling around the world. We were in boarding school. And when I reached the top, I prayed to Jamling, the mother goddess Everest, and I thanked her for the successful journey, and I prayed to her to bring us down this mountain safely, because we still had filming to do up there. We spent almost 2 hours on the summit, which is the longest anybody had ever stayed until then. Normally, you don't spend more than 10 minutes. You get up there, take your photos, look around, and come back down. And one of the first things when you're married, you need to let your spouse know when you reach the destination. So I reached up there, I took out my satellite phone, and I called my wife, and I said, "Hi, honey, I reached the summit of Everest. We have a beautiful weather. It's really nice up here." And she said, "Great, now get down."
Thank you. And also, suddenly recently, Alex founded Taipei 101, and I think one of the things that people were asking him is, does he feel fear? How does he cope with fear? You're talking about dangerous situations, right? How do you cope with it?
Well, fear is a word that we don't think about when we're on the mountains, when we're doing dangerous things. Because the moment you start thinking about fear, the moment you start thinking, I might fall here, you will fall. You don't think. You have to keep all the negativity out and focus on the good, focus on the positive. Because the moment you start thinking negative, you're going to start making mistakes. So as far as I'm concerned, I know, and I tell others also, whenever you're on mountains, on slopes, or on altitudes, just stay positive. Just stay focused and stay positive.
Do you have a way to train for it? It's doesn't come naturally, right? You guess.
I guess the only way to train for it is to go on a mountain. Or you go up on one of these tall buildings and stand on the edge and look down, maybe see how you feel.
And just do it until you desensitize.
And if you want, I can take you.
Okay, I know Edgar will go up. I know Edgar wants to go to base camp. Thank you for sharing that. Maybe let's switch gear a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the Sherpa community and how is climbing Everest like now today compared to 1953 when you first scaled the mountain.
Well, I'm sure you've all heard about the Sherpas, because Sherpas are basically, we are an ethnic group of people. We are not people that climb mountains. People get mistaken for that. They don't know we're an ethnic group of people that live in Nepal. We're all Buddhist by belief, and we have our own language, spoken language. And Sherpas migrated from eastern Tibet 500 years ago and settled in the Himalayas on the Nepalese side. And one of the things that we outperform most human beings on altitudes, because we've lived there for generations, so many generations that we are adapted to the high altitude. Our blood streams carry more oxygen, living at this altitude. So we are able to perform, climb faster and perform better than any other human beings on the mountains. That's why, most 99% of expeditions in the Himalayas, they take the Sherpa support. The Sherpas have been, the backbone of all the expeditions and all the successes. You hear of people that have, 400 people climbing Everest these days, in one season, 400 to 500. And the Sherpas are there doing all the work. They're in the background, they're carrying all the supplies, they're setting up all the tents, they're making food for you. If you pay enough money, I think there might be a day where somebody will carry you. So if you want to get carried, you let me know and keep you in line. But they risk their lives, on the mountain a lot more than anybody else. Almost about 120 to 140 Sherpas have died on Mount Everest alone so far. And just last year, one of the first accidents that occurred on Everest was when two Sherpas died. When an ice fall, the serac collapsed and they never found their bodies. And both the Sherpas were first cousins of mine. Both young 19-year and 20-year-old boys, who were just performing, doing the duty, carrying supplies up there. So they risked their lives, so that the other, clients can achieve their goals. And today, commercialization of Everest has gone out of control. Even anyone from this room has the opportunity to climb. If you cough up almost about 100,000 US dollars, there's a chance for you to go and climb. So just the other day I heard one of the funniest words I never heard before, and this lady told me that she was a commercial climber. And that's the first time I heard a commercial climber, because these are people that come, they have no climbing experiences at all. Never climbed a mountain in the whole life, and they go and climb Mount Everest. And for that you have to be in good physical shape, because now rest of the work, everything has been done, by the Sherpas. They bring the food in your tent for you also. They set up everything at base camp with electric blankets. Now they have, it's gone totally, heaters they have. You were talking about heaters earlier. They have heaters at base camp. So whole system is become so much more convenient and more accessible for anybody who wants to, achieve their goal of climbing this mountain.
And what will responsible tourism be looking like for or responsible climbing? How would you try to bring back many of the spirit of climbing Everest?
Well, I think the important thing about climbing is I don't have any issues with anybody climbing, but I think the important thing is you need to enjoy your journey. You need to know why you want to climb. You have no experience and you go and climb this mountain, and then you come back down, you take a few photos, and then you brag about it to your friends, and you write a book, all about me. And most of the books written by Western climbers is all about themselves, and they don't even mention the Sherpa who was there to help them. The Sherpas who are pulling them and pushing them at the same time, the Sherpas who are carrying the bottles of oxygen for them, and they don't mention any of these things. And they write in such a way that, makes you, when you read the book, you feel like, oh wow, this guy is a really good climber, but in the background, none of that happened. And I think it's important, anything you do in life, you need to enjoy the journey, whether you're working at Igloo or whether make sure you enjoy what you're doing here. And if you don't, you should change your profession, or you should change, not even go on the mountains to climb. It's years of experience makes you a good climber. You climb for the passion, and you climb for the thrill, not for the selfie. It's like getting, you go and get a license to fly a single engine plane, and tomorrow you want to fly a 747. It doesn't work that way. You need years of experience to get there.
Thank you. So as you're wrapping up, maybe tell us a bit about your foundation that you have. You run.
Well, basically I spent most of my life after Everest, because getting to the top of this mountain was not the end of my goal. It was just the beginning. We have to set ourselves to new challenges and not be afraid to dream of new ideas, because it's the next challenge that motivates and inspires us. After Everest, I spend all my life, even today, continue to serve the people of the Himalayas. Whether it's the Sherpas or the Nepalese or the Tibetans, anyone, whether it's with building schools, helping with education, medical facilities, and we continue to do that through the work of through my father's foundation, and the Hillary family also does the same. So both the families work, join hands together and work together in helping the people, the Sherpas. Especially we help the widows of the Sherpas that have died, because the insurance they get from an expedition is hardly 10,000 US dollars, which is nothing. And the widows and the children, left behind. So we support the education of all these children and the families.
So if anybody want to contribute to the foundation, do look for Jamling after this. Maybe just one final closing remarks for the group here. Everyone here is in prop tech, real estate, in businesses, starting companies or investing. If there's one business advice that you want to give from your experience in mountaineering, what would it be?
I think what I mentioned earlier also is be passionate about what you do. Make sure you enjoy what you do. That way you'll be able to contribute 100%, 200%, in anything you do in life. Stay focused and always know that you can go back again. you can regroup and go back. Just remember these few points. And I want to say something my father always, told me. He said, "Be a leader, be a guide, guide your team and accomplish your goals despite the hardships." But he said, above all, be great, make others great.
Well, with that, thank you, Jamling, for the amazing inspirational speech. So when I met Jamling about 2 years ago, we had just sent our log up into space. So I had the opportunity to meet him at actually the Four Seasons, I think, down the road or something like that. And then I was just showing him that this log that went up to space. And I was like, who cares about space? I'll bring your log up to Mount Everest. So here we are 2 years later. We have our latest product that we're launching, and we're launching it, and Jamling is going to be bring that log up into Mount Everest in this next climbing season in May 2026. So I would just like to pass the log to Jamling. This is our latest log box. This is not a product launch or anything, but this is our latest log box, our Key Box 4, which I know a couple of partners are very excited about. This is the Mount Everest edition of the altitude 8849 meters written right there. And the pin code to unlock it, you want to guess? 8849. Let's see whether it works, right? Alright, yeah, so we open it. And we have the 10th anniversary Mount Everest edition right here. I would like to pass this to Jamling, who has kindly agreed to help us bring it to the top of Mount Everest to test whether it works on top, because our Access Anywhere technology without Wi-Fi on top of Mount Everest, it should unlock and it should withstand the harsh environment on the top of Mount Everest. Right, so. So this is a segment that I think is not scripted in at all, and we are just doing it on the fly. So Jamling has a New York Times bestseller called "Touching My Father's Soul." It's written when was it written? Talk about it.
2001. I wrote this book, and it was basically, like I said earlier, all the books were written by the Westerners and none by the Sherpas. So I thought it was high time that story from the Sherpa side should come out, but talking more about the Sherpas, their lives, about their beliefs, and about the mountain and about my father.
Thank you. So Jamling has kindly signed this book and passed to me, and just like how Jamling has his father as a role model, I also have my dad as my role model. He's standing over there right there. Can I invite my mother to stage? This is completely not scripted. I think it's got a shot. I think we look quite alike. As my hair gets lesser and lesser, we look more and more alike. I think when I first started the business, he was my first angel investor. He said, no, actually he didn't invest first. He said, you go and do your thing. We're not going to give you any money. Figure it out. But when we actually raised our first round, the first angel investment came in. But he's been my angel investor since I was born, right? I have food, house to stay in, and all that. And I don't know when the ROI is coming back to him. But we're working on it, working hard on it. But I think at 70, he's starting his own startup, running his own thing. And the energy that he has, keeps me inspired and keeps me going every day. So this is for you.
Round of applause again for Anthony and Jamling. Can you stay on stage? Before we wrap up this segment and release you to a wonderful evening of networking, please join me in welcoming all our sponsors and partners on stage for a photograph with Jamling and Anthony, as well as our sponsor flag, which will be also going up to Mount Everest. So when